everybody is doing well. In today's video, I am in the company of Viva Bella Extina, and we're going to be discussing whether or not white genocide is actually taking place in Dominican Republic. As usual, I want to thank all of my subscribers for their support and for anybody who posts comments in the comment section. A big shout out to Kem123, Stephen Rose, and also please subscribe to Viva Bella Extina. She has great content, and I think that she's a person that a lot of people need to follow because she sees both sides of the coins. She doesn't stick to one side, and she's very objective with all of the topics that she talks about. So as stated before, we're going to be talking about the topic I mentioned before, and I'm just going to give out a brief of my thoughts in regards to this. So I think there is a lot of concern that a lot of Dominicans have expressed in terms of the white population being decreased in Dominican Republic, and it's due to the illegal migration of Haitians and due to our history. And I'm not totally in disagreement with that, but there are other factors that need to be taken into account. You know, people are complaining about other groups of people that are currently residing in Dominican Republic, like Venezuelans, Chinese descent people, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and these groups have been in our country for many, many years, but there are other ones who have come within the last 10 years or so. Also, we're going to be touching bases about what is the concept of race in Dominican Republic. And honestly, I think that when it comes to the Haitians, I think it's more of a cultural difference issue that we have, and economics. And also the fact that we have a corrupt government. I mean, the fact that our current president, Danilo Medina, wants to change the constitution so that he can remain in power. That tells you right there that the country is an entire disaster. And a lot of things need to be addressed. And there's a lot of things that people are not talking about that we're going to be talking about today so that people can get a better understanding of what is going on in Dominican Republic. And also, we're going to be talking about the census between the century of the 15th century all the way to the 21st century. And Christina will provide information about what is the current population that we have currently in Dominican Republic, what groups of people we have. So without any further ado, I'm going to let Christina Viva Bella to continue.
All right. Well, thank you again for having me on your channel. It's always a pleasure to do these discussions with you. And, you know, I always get nervous before doing these, but I don't know why. But anyway, so on to the topic. So I guess I'll kind of start off with just talking about the racial composition of the Dominican Republic, what it has been historically, going up to what it is now. So based on what I could find online, well, first I started off by looking at what is the current racial composition of the Dominican Republic. And basically the numbers that I found, some of them varied a little bit, but it was pretty much similar in that, like this one that I found, it said that the current population is 72% mixed, 16% white, 11% black, and then 1% others. So that includes, you know, Asians, Arabs, and, you know, other groups of people. So while doing my research, I tried to look more like what has historically been the racial composition of Dominicans, and to see like, you know, are certain populations really decreasing or are others increasing? So I think it's important to know like the historical side of it, as far as, you know, what groups really came to DR and what is now in our gene pool. So I came across this one website. Actually, one of my subscribers sent it to me a while back. It just talks about, you know, Dominican history. And there is one graph on that website that kind of shows like the three main groups, which are, you know, European, African, and Native American. And it spans over 16 generations. And then it kind of shows like over time, which ethnicities have like grown more. So on that page, it basically says that while the Dominican population is overwhelmingly of Spanish descent, it has become very mixed by increasing injections of African genes. The first major wave occurring within those first 50 years. The first slaves were brought to DR in 1503. So that was only 6 years after Columbus arrived. And then there was a second large injection of African genes beginning at the beginning of the 19th century. So based on what was going on then in those early 1800s, I would say probably due to like the Haitian occupation, that probably, brought a lot more Haitians to the Dominican side. You also had the African-American freed slaves that went to Samaná, and I believe some went to Puerto Plata as well. And then, we've also had other like Black Caribbean, people come to the island as well. But going back to like more that early history, so when you compare the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo versus the French colony of Saint Domingue, overall, the Spanish, they didn't import as many slaves as the French did. At one point, the slaves formed about 10% of the population, in contrast to the French colony where they formed 90% of the population. And in the Dominican side, the population consisted mainly of whites and mixed race people, most of whom, the majority of them were free. And there is one chart which I had sent to you where it kind of broke down the different populations, and this was in the year 1750. And it showed that there was a white population of 30,000, a slave population of almost 9,000, and the group of free people of color, meaning the mulattoes and the mestizos, was also 30,000. So even at that point, while the white population was 43%, so was the mixed race population. It was also 43%. They were literally one number off. So that kind of shows that even from 260 years ago, the population in DR there's always been a very big mixed race population there. And the other thing is that, Santo Domingo, it didn't develop as a major slave colony the way the French side did. They didn't really tap into the sugar industry, and but rather livestock became more important there. And that's not something that really requires a lot of slave labor. So for that reason, they didn't end up bringing a lot more slaves in. And I came across this account of a French colonist. His name is Moreau de Saint Mary. I don't know if I'm saying that right. So this account was from the 1790s. So he was born in the French colony, but he traveled a lot to the Spanish side. And in his account, he said that the number of people of color, or the mixed race, was very considerable compared to the number of slaves. He also said that many of the Spanish colonists had one or two aspects that point to a remote mixture. So in other words, even the Spanish weren't 100% white. Like you could still tell they had some recent admixture, whether it be, African mixture or Taino mixture. And then he said the number of Black slaves was few compared to, the French side, but that the Spanish never really took advantage of the richness of the soil. So going back to the fact that they didn't really tap into the, the sugar industry. And so as far as the treatments of the Black slaves, he said that it was almost the same to that of their owner, often being treated as companions rather than slaves. Now, I don't know if it was always that way. I would assume that in the very beginning, like when those first slaves were brought over, because the Spanish were still searching for gold, the treatment was probably a lot worse because, gold mining is such a labor-intensive work. And that is one of the reasons why the Taino population died off, because, they had the Taino mining for gold, along with the fact that they also died from the diseases. But, eventually, though, the Spanish, they kind of lost interest in Santo Domingo. They went on to, look for gold in Mexico, and they went to South America. So a lot of those initial Spanish settlers ended up leaving. But yeah, so it led to this, cattle ranching society where the slaves and the masters were almost like compadre, And in my opinion, I think that also kind of facilitated the mixing between whites and Blacks, because there wasn't so much of a hostile relationship between them. So I don't know. I think, like I said, this whole concept of race mixing, it has always been there. It's not a recent or new concept. And so if you compare the 43% white in the year 1750 to the 16% white that there is now, of course, that is a major decrease. But in my opinion, I think more than anything, that is just due to the generational mixing that has gone on year after year. And it's just an island, so people can only go but so far. So they're going to mix
Exactly.
within each other. So do I think it's necessarily a white genocide? I don't think so. I don't think people are like outright attacking or going after the white Dominicans. And I don't know, I feel like this concept of like hating white people is kind of foreign to most Dominicans.
Yeah.
Even the Black Dominicans or the ones in my family, they're not anti-white, they don't hate white people. So, I mean, now in these days, can you say there are some Dominicans that maybe have this type of concept? Maybe, but I just don't see it being something that's going to take over DR. I just don't. So that's okay. That was kind of long, sorry, but
No,
that was
that's
my little
okay.
historical overview.
No, that's okay. Well, I have some other charts that I also explore about the genetic makeup of Dominican Republic, and it showed like 59% was Europe, no, a mix. So I don't understand why a lot of Dominicans who are half black and half white refer to themselves as mestizo when that's not the correct term. I don't mean to be offensive to anybody who is watching us, but to me, that's a mulatto, somebody who is half white and half black. And I this is a lot of that is confusing to me because that's not the correct term to for this type of person. But at the same time, 59% of mulattoes. Then we got 33% Euro descent. And the concept about Spaniards that I think a lot of people are unaware. A lot of people assume that all Spaniards are white, blue eyes, or very white looking people. And they're also very mixed people, that they
That's what I've
had
heard.
Moorish who at some point were in their country. They have Arabs that went over there.
Mhm.
So it varies depending on from which part of Spain somebody is from. I
Yeah.
have a friend from Portugal because for some reason some people assumed that I look Portuguese, and I was really surprised. I was like, "How me? What I don't look Portuguese." But she said that there are Portuguese people that are as dark as you are, or darker than I am. They come in all shades and colors. So that's
Mm.
something really important that people need to take into consideration before they start saying that we are all, half white and half black. Maybe there was somebody that was mixed with Moorish, who, Africa, it's kind of close to, Spain. And I'm sure there were some people that migrated at some point in history, and there was some mixture at some point. And
Mhm.
so people often don't think about that. But I also saw in the chart that we got 12% African descent people, and then 33%, and then like 4% or 2% actually of Asian or other race. So that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, when I went to Bonao, I saw a lot of Koreans, a lot of Chinese descent Dominicans, and they have their own Chinatown over there. It's like
Right.
crazy, a
Yeah.
lot of stores, a lot of
Mhm.
business owned by them. And people often don't think about that part of Dominican Republic. There are other places that is also um, populated by people of Asian descent. I went to
Mhm.
school with somebody who was half Chinese, half mulatto. So those type of people also exist. We got 39 skin tones in Dominican Republic. So you see all kinds of people throughout the entire country.
Yeah.
In only 16%, according to the current census, 16% of the population is white. So I don't think that have changed. And in terms of the how mixed we were since we were discovered and all of that, well, in the 15th and 16th century, there was rape that happened, between the Spaniards and the Taino woman, and also the Spaniards and the African woman. But there was also a law or an act that was passed in the 16th century where mixed marriages were allowed. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, there was a small percentage of people that did get married who were like one Taino person or one Taino woman and a white or a Spaniards and Africans and Spaniards and all of that. But there was a lot of people who did came together and didn't get married and have their kids, and also rape. And there was prostitution that did happen back then. So a lot of people came from these three things that I just mentioned, and then subsequently in other centuries we have the mulattoes, and there were still some Spaniards that lived there who will choose to marry or have a relationship with someone who was a mulatto. So you get even more mixture over there.
Yeah.
Or people that they had the three races, the white, black, and the Taino. They
Mm-hmm.
was more dominant back then.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of Tainos that died due to diseases, due to the hard work that they were asked to do, due to slavery, but also there was the marriage between Spaniards and Taino, or relationships between these two groups.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you think about other groups that came, I was really surprised when I checked the amount of groups of people that we have in Dominican Republic. I mean, it's overwhelming. We got Romanian, we got Greeks, we got Irish, of course, people from Barbados, from St. Thomas, Dominica, Haiti. We got people from all over the world. It's almost like the United Nations, a little bit of everything. It's
Yeah, it
like,
really is.
wow. So, but the whole concept of race in Dominican Republic, it depends largely on the family. There's a lot of ignorant people, and then there are people who don't give any importance to race, and they give more importance to culture and nationality. And then you see people that, yes, they're aware of how dark they are or how white they are, and that they identified as such. And I think that that's pretty normal, because it's a variety of different groups of people, and we're all going to have different mindsets. That's normal to us. And let me see what else I was going to say. Well, then we got all of these groups, and then when we get into that 12 years of Balaguer, which was after we got the dictatorship and we got um, Juan Bosch and other small, short governments, Balaguer had a very dark um, impression about Haitians. He will blame Haitians all the time for everything, anything that went wrong in Dominican Republic. So it was not only Trujillo, but Balaguer also had its influence. There were other Dominicans who were intellectual, who will want to make the entire country as just a Spanish colony, with all the culture from Spain, when in reality we are a mixture of all of these different cultures, Taino, African, Spaniards, French. We got everything. We got everything. So, like, but it's predominantly those three groups,
Right.
and I think it's a pity that from there on, he started imposing that, which is the opposite of what Juan Pablo Duarte stated. He said, all of us, whatever your skin tone is, we're going to demonstrate to the world that we are brothers and sisters, and we're going to fight the enemy. That was his legacy, and obviously Joaquin Balaguer didn't take that into account. Um, also, there were other intellectuals from Spain, like Carlos Esteban uh, Reive, or Neive, I think that's his last name. He was trying to bring more of the Africanness of Dominican Republic, to pretend that we don't have that culture within ourselves. That's not right. I mean, it's just there. Our music is highly influenced by African. I also read some information about our ethnicity. Our language is influenced by the Taino language. Our food, our behavior, there's a lot of things that are influenced by these three cultures, and they're all, to me, equally important. None is more important than the other one, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't often think about that. And then when it comes to, the concept of race again, I just don't understand how somebody who is, you know, like a mixed person, I don't know why they refer to themselves as mestizo. Like if you are half white and half black, you're not mestizo, you are mulatto. That I don't understand that. And then people who are, I don't know, a little bit darker than me, they they will, no, much darker than me, they will say, oh, I'm indio or indio oscuro, like, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not confusing to me. I don't understand why they can just look at themselves in the mirror and say, okay, I am this race or I am this other race. Like, I don't understand that. But again, it also varies from person to person, family to
Mm-hmm.
family. Everybody has a different concept when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot of things. I mean, for one, when it comes to Dominican culture, it's like, I mean, you can't deny these influences that we have. I mean, the Spanish European influence is obviously there, but you can't deny, like you said, that African influence, even some of that remaining influences from the Taino culture. Like from Tainos, we got casabe. We got like the bohio style houses that you see in the campo. We got a lot of words from them, like sábana, yuca, caimán, huracán, tabaco,
Exactly.
hamaca, that comes from them. And then from the African, our love for plátano comes from them.
Yes.
Mangu it derives from, I read, Ghanaian fufu. That's what it's called. Kongkong is Nigerian descent thing. And they actually call it that, Kongkong too, but they spell it with a K instead of a C. I even read that our use of cinnamon, mint, sweet clove, that comes from the Africans, and even our preference for white rice comes from them as well. And then, of course, you can't deny the African influence in our music and our dance. I mean, that's just so visibly there. And my opinion, but I've always felt like when you compare like the music of Caribbean Latinos to, say, maybe Central or Southern American, like you can tell that big difference. And I always say the reason our music is so lit, okay, I need to find a better word, not lit, but like so movido and fun, I say it's because of that African influence.
Yes.
That's there. I mean,
It
and
is
I don't
there.
know how many some people are kind of like ashamed of that. I don't know. I feel like it's something to be proud of. And then, of course, the European influence, the obvious things like our language that we speak, our Spanish names, the architecture. I feel like a lot of that historical architecture is, of course, Spanish. You have like the religion, of course, Christianity, Catholicism, that came from them. And then I think like someone like the social etiquette comes from
Yeah.
the Europeans as well, and things like, besando la mano and things like that. So, when it comes to the concept of race, I've mentioned this a few times on my channel, but, my parents never talked about race, ever.
Yeah.
The only time that may have come up is if they happen to experience something with an American here. My mom, she did have some not so good situations with both white and, Black Americans here. My dad, I never really heard him say that he had issues with people, but it was always just, we're Dominican and that's it. Even for me, even though I was born here, I was just Dominican. And like you said, even though we didn't identify maybe as a certain race, I mean, we would acknowledge our skin colors. So in that aspect, yes, there were some family members that were called indio or negro or moreno. The white ones, they just call them rubio. So that definitely exists. But I just feel like, as a Dominican, considering that most of us are so mixed, I mean, the whitest Dominicans have Black blood in them, and the blackest Dominicans have white blood in them. So I just feel like the racism that does sometimes exist, or that does kind of manifest itself, I'm just kind of like, why? Because at the end of the day, none of us are 100% any race. So why the need for racism? Why the need for some to feel some sense of superiority because of the fact that maybe they have more European blood? I don't know, that's just kind of like my 2 cents when it comes to the whole race thing.
Exactly. I mean, I think also people are some people are ignorant, and then some people might be hurt for one reason or another. Maybe they had a bad experience with somebody of dark complexion or the opposite, and maybe they're traumatized with that, and they're just trying to project their hate towards this group of people, whichever it is, white or
Mm,
black. So I think that also that also affects the perception that some people have. And when it comes to the murder rates, for example, in Dominican Republic, we have about 1,525 like Haitian in the prisons because of murders they committed. But it was not only against Dominicans, but against themselves. I mean, I was reading about this guy who was with his wife who decided to kill her because he said that she sent the devil after him. So obviously, this person it's mentally unstable and
mm,
decided to do that. There were other mothers who were from Haiti that killed their own kids, and then
mm,
there were other Haitians that fought with each other because they were trying to get a girl. So it's not just Dominicans that are being killed by Haitians, but also they kill each other. And I understand where Dominicans are coming from. They are afraid. They see this behavior as something that they don't want to have in the country, in a country where we already have enough violence, enough
mm,
corruption by itself, with no Haitians or other group of people involved. I mean, because here is why I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, like I understand where they're coming from. I understand that yes, we do have a lot of differences in our cultures and we don't want more violence in our country, but let's not act as if Dominican Republic was nice and perfect. And
mm,
other groups of people like Venezuelans, like Puerto Ricans, like Cubans. Yes, I love all of them dearly, but and we do have more things in common with them, culturally speaking, than with Haitians. However, there is also a lot of difference between these groups and Dominicans. And those
mm,
differences sometimes come to the surface. And one of the things that I notice in each one of these groups, and I'm not saying all of them are like that, but I do notice that they demand a lot of attention. They demand more of what we can offer to them. And
mm,
it's not fair. I mean, granted, there are Dominicans who will take advantage of them, who will, maybe tell them to start a business with them or to give them jobs and they don't pay them well enough. All kinds of people, exist across the board, but there are some of them, some Venezuelans that are very arrogant and they look down on Dominicans. Same thing with some Puerto Ricans, same thing with Cubans. And I am talking about people that were born and raised in these countries, and we can get along, but we can also have our differences. And the fact that people are completely ignoring all of these groups that are somewhat causing problems in the country is also kind of ignorant, and like, for example, if people are concerned that white Dominicans are not as high as before. Well, since very early on, we have always been a mixed culture, a mixed country. It's like, yes, we did have the migration of countries from Europe and Barbados, St. Thomas, all this, but majority is mixed. And I don't think that is an issue. If white Dominicans decided to migrate to the United States or other countries, was due to economical reasons, and due to the fact that they were at some point as recipients of political asylum because the government that was back in the 80s, like Joaquin Balaguer's government, was very violent. It was a dictatorship, just as bad, or maybe not as bad as the one from Trujillo. But a lot of people were in disagreement with his regime and decided to, go to Venezuela as political refugees or as asylees, Or also they will go out for economical reasons. Like my cousins who live here in Boston, they are white. I mean, very, very white. And they came here in the 1980s due to economical reasons. And some of my cousins were, the majority of them are educated, they went to college and all of that, but they were not able to make enough money to support themselves, and they decided to migrate to the United States. And it had nothing to do, with the Haitians, trying to kill them or anything like that. That is not to say that we were not victims of the 7 invasions that the Haitians are responsible for, or that the beheadings of Mocha did not happen, because it did happen. But I mean, to just put the entire blame to the issues that we had in the past and that we may have currently with Haiti is the only reason as to why Dominicans decide to leave or die. I don't think that's the whole truth.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean, there's definitely a lot of factors that can be taken into account as to why the white population in DR may be decreasing. But I mean, I don't know, like you said, a lot of them, I feel like they do leave for economic reasons. And at the end of the day, I mean, the more people keep mixing with each other, the extreme populations are going to decrease. And that just is what it is. I mean, unless you as a white Dominican decide that you're only going to procreate with another white Dominican, then okay, that is one way you can ensure your white lineage. But who's to say all white Dominicans are going to do that, you know? So, I mean, I guess it just depends on the person, and if that concept of race and is something that they care about, then hey, do you. But again, who's to say all of them will do that? And then going back to all these feelings of, like with all these different groups coming in, on the one hand, I do feel like a lot of times Dominicans, they kind of have tunnel vision when it comes to the Haitians. And granted, they are the biggest foreign group in the country, but there's so many other groups in the country as well. And I came across some information kind of breaking down some of the different groups that have migrated to the country within like the past 10, 15 years. And I found this article, it's from January of this year. And it said actually that Venezuelans have surpassed Haitians in obtaining Dominican residency. So Haitian people, they're still the most numerous foreign population, but Venezuelans now lead as far as obtaining Dominican residency. And then the article said that the Immigration Directorate of DR last year, they granted 16,709 residencies, 2,675 went to Venezuelans, 1,192 to Haitians, 1,672 to Americans, and then 1,485 to Chinese people. So as you can see, we've been getting a lot of different, groups of other people coming into the country as well. And with the Venezuelans, I have heard that, a lot of them have been coming to the country. I was telling you the other day that my uncle has a daughter that is half, Venezuelan, and she's living in DR now. When I was in DR last year in the spring, I took an Uber and my driver was, from Venezuela. And, I understand that, there has been a lot of political unrest in Venezuela. So I understand a lot of them kind of, running away from that and coming to DR. But at the same time, if you're going to do that, then, you should probably check your attitude a little bit and not come with this presumptuous attitude or kind of like expecting all these things, But apart from them, I also found that as of last year, DR is also now the largest country to establish diplomatic ties with China, and it is now also home to the largest community of Chinese immigrants in the Caribbean. So I found that to be very interesting, and that's Santo Domingo now has its own Chinatown. And going back to how you mentioned earlier, Bonao, my family is from Bonao, and I was talking to my cousin the other day, and she was saying how like there almost every corner now there's Chinese stores, and she said the Korean population in Bonao is growing a lot. There's like Koreans everywhere. I remember when I was younger and I would go to Bonao. I remember there was like a neighboring, it was like a little neighborhood close to where my family stays. And, I remember seeing the little Korean kids there. And I always found that so fascinating because they were Korean, yet they spoke Dominican, or not Dominican, they spoke Spanish like a Dominican. So I always found that to be very interesting. But, I mean, it's not just Haitians in the country. I mean, there's literally everybody. So to say that the Haitians are taking over and this and that, it's like, I mean, it's not just them. And I'm not saying that these other groups are taking over necessarily, but I mean, they're surely, but slowly, increasing in numbers and coming to DR as well. So,
And
I
they
mean,
come in all shapes and colors, and maybe they'll mix with people over there and have
yeah.
family, and that country's gonna become more mixed. So
Exactly.
like,
It's just going to keep happening. That's how it's been, and that's how it's going to continue to be. The more we get these other groups coming, the population is going to continue mixing and mixing. The straight up white population is going to decrease, but then again, the straight up Black population may decrease too, as people just keep mixing with each other. So that's why I feel like to get so hung up on the issue of race when it comes to us, I feel like it's kind of pointless. Like, you can't stop people from, mixing with each other. That just is what it is, in my opinion.
yeah, I think that people should be more concerned about educating people, building schools, trying to address the problems with our current president, who wants to be the president for 4 more years, even though everybody is unhappy with him.
Goodness.
That should be our main focus right now. Like, I don't know, trying to create jobs for everyone, like the public and private sectors, all of those things that, from my perspective, are priority. Those are the things that we should all focus on and to make our country better. And, in terms of like the mixing that happened, I mean, yes, we have all of these groups. What I think one of the reasons as to why we are Dominicans, or at least this is my concept, is because we are, in a way, one of the countries that are more mixed culturally, racially. And I'm not saying the slavery or, that people were not raped or things like that, but the slavery in Dominican Republic was, as you stated before, much less severe than in other countries. And as you said before, the Spaniards lost interest in Dominican Republic and decided to go to Peru, Mexico, and other countries that offer more resources than we had at the time. And that led to the slave and his owner to at some point have like a better relationship with each other because they were trying to survive, right? Because the economy of Dominican, of what it was, the Hispaniola, was, getting worse. And I think that there was some African slaves that also were transformed or converted into Christianism. I think they were called Serafines. I don't know the exact name, but that also exists over there. They integrated into the Christian culture, which is very different than what happened with Haiti, because the French never actually took the time to teach them any religion. They just treat them straight up as slaves. So that's a major difference that people often don't talk about. There was one town, which I don't remember the exact name of it, but there was one town that was close to Haiti where slavery, it was on one of, I think it was at a town in Dajabon. I'm not 100% sure, but in the 19th century, the Africans were mistreated badly, like treated as bad as in Haiti. So I will say that did happen in Dominican Republic. And I think Toussaint Louverture did work towards freeing that group of people in between Dominican Republic and Haiti back then. So that did happen. But the majority of the country, slavery wasn't bad. It was, they were almost as friends. And, from very early on, the Spaniards did mix with Tainos and mulattoes. And I was looking at the census from the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th century. And we already got people, who were Danish, people from Greece, people from Ireland, people from Germany. In fact, the accordion, which is part of merengue, came from Germany. That's an influence right there that we had from them. And
Yeah.
we got Italian, we got Ireland, Assyrians, Romanian, all this group of people from 16 all the way to the 19th century. It's crazy. All this group of people.
Yeah.
Like, oh my
Yeah.
God. I mean, when I go to Dominican Republic and I go around, different provinces or different towns, you come across all different people and you're like, are you Dominican? Like, it was so embarrassing for me when I went to renew my Dominican passport, and this Chinese guy came and he was before me. He talked perfect Dominican Spanish. He told me, "Oh, where can I find the restroom?" And I said, "Oh, over there." And then I asked him, "Are you Dominican?" And he just looked at me like, "Of course I'm Dominican." He got mad. Like,
Yeah.
you know it's like they get really mad if you don't acknowledge them as
Mm-hmm.
Dominicans. Then you get Taiwanese people, Filipinos. I'm like, I found out that Alberto Francisco Camaño Deño, that last name Camaño Deño came from Philippines. And if you look at Camaño Deño, he has certain features. I mean, he's not Chinese, but he kind of look Chinese. He's kind of like this, and you can tell like how mixed we are. It,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And the thing about it is that people need to understand that concept that one group is going to overpower the other one because of mixing. And it's not white genocide. Again, I understand how Dominicans are concerned. We do have a murder rate. That's something that cannot be left out of 800 people, that have been killed by Haitians, and these are Dominicans. But the murder is not only committed by Haitians. Dominican kill each other, Haitians kill each other. And then you have other groups, Venezuelans, Puerto Rican, Cubans, who also committed murder in Dominican Republic. That also exists as well. Um, and like when there was one time when I was talking to this other YouTuber who was saying, well, what happened to Cielo? Look what happened. She refused to date this guy from Haiti, and he did what he did. He's chopped off her arms and hurt her knees and all of that. But if you look at Cielo is not white.
Mm-hmm.
Cielo is mixed. And a lot of people who have been victims of violence or murder have been people who are mixed. There are some that are white, yes, but the majority that are victims of violence and murders committed by the Haitians are mixed biracial, multiracial people. So it's not, my whole point is that I want Haitian people to feel empowered to address the problems in their country and try to fix their country as much as we need to do the same thing. It's more about economics and cultural differences. Language is not the same. Religion, well, we have Catholicism as our main religion in Dominican Republic, the same for Haiti, but Haitians also, from what I know, practice voodoo, which is not something that we practice much in Dominican Republic. Are there some Dominicans that did? Yes, because of our occupation, the occupation the Haitians had over us for 22 years. But the majority of us do not practice voodoo, and that's cultural clash over there. Also, there are certain Haitians who also, you know, if you don't, like, for example, there are some Haitians who do sell candy, like, I don't know, any lollipops, all kinds of candy, and some of them have been putting uh, some type of poison rat poisoning in the food or whatever they sell, fruits, candies, whatever they sell. I'm not saying all Haitians do that, but some of them have done that, especially if they're not treated well by the Dominican. So that also exists, which brings concerns to the Dominican, again, due to our history. But to make Haitians responsible for everything that goes on in Dominican Republic, for the murders, for all kinds of crimes, I think that's unfair. But that mindset comes from many, many centuries ago. And one of the people who has a major influence on a lot of Dominicans was Joaquin Balaguer and other intellectuals that have not acknowledged our African side of us and
Mm,
who want to blame and deem that African culture and race as inferior to our culture. And that's not the right way to look at these things. I think that we should be all proud of who we are, our language, our culture, everything.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually somebody commented this under one of my videos yesterday, but they said that the mind of Dominicans has been conditioned to be on the defensive at all times because we face so many invasions, including by our own neighbors, and that this has kind of continued over time. So I think that goes in line with what you were saying, because of things that have happened historically. That is why um it's easy for Dominicans to sometimes is blame the Haitians, especially for a lot of the things that happen. So, from that perspective, I can't entirely blame Dominicans that do that, but at the same time, I feel like I said, you can't place all the blame on them because I mean there have been so many things or so many issues that Dominican Republic that has nothing to do with Haitians, and like you said, a lot of these murders, even the ones committed by them, it's not just against the whiter Dominicans. I don't think for the most part it's like racially motivated. I would say probably a lot of it is crimes of passion or whatever else you have. I don't think it's racially motivated, but again, I do think all these things that we have gone through historically can kind of lead to a bit of like a xenophobia against other groups of people. But that's when, I don't know, I feel like we kind of have to have an open mind to look at things more objectively and to not be so quick to make rationales just based off of, our emotions or these feelings that we may have. And I don't know, just to try to look for better ways to address these issues that we have, whether it's, internally within the country or even some of the issues that we do have with Haitian people. So, and, you know, I mentioned this in my last video, but, we love to hear about, the good stuff about us and the great things that we do. But, we have our own issues that we need to address. And sometimes we don't like to hear it. We don't like to talk about it, but it has to be said, because if we don't address it, how else are we going to, be able to move forward or progress from the current issues that we have? So,
And
yeah, I mean,
exactly. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, so I mean, not everything comes down to race, like you say. A lot of it is cultural differences, and just, I mean, there's just so many other factors that come into account with that, with everything that's going on.
Exactly. I mean, we Dominicans, we like to be told, oh, your country is so great. Oh, your culture. Oh my God, so many groups of people. So it's so rich, it's so nice. But when it comes to us addressing our own flaws, then that's an issue. And that needs to change. We're not influenced by African Americans or by whoever. No, this is just us assessing ourselves and looking at our country and ourselves as individuals and other people around us, and objectively saying this is wrong and this is right,
Mm,
and nobody has the entire truth. And whether people like it or not, it is what it is. And we need to make a change,
yeah,
take the necessary measures to make a change in ourselves and in our society to make it better. Because
right.
before Haitians came, especially since the 2010, I grew up over there in Dominican Republic. We always had a lot of issues. and it had nothing to do with Haitians. Absolutely nothing to do with Haitians. I mean,
Yeah.
we have a corrupt government. A lot of people who decide to be, who run a business or work certain jobs for the governments that are not qualified. I mean, I work as a musician in Dominican Republic, and I remember that every 4 years, people who belong to a certain party will be chosen to work as a music teacher or as a director of the National Conservatory of Music when the person did not have the credentials to do it.
Mm,
That also exists. So how are we educating our kids? That still exists nowadays, and that has nothing to do with Haitians at all.
yeah.
That's us. And like,
Uh-huh.
okay, I mean, anything that comes from electing a president. I mean, and this is not unique to Dominican Republic. Like in Mexico, what was the name of that other candidate? Like women were gonna vote for this candidate because he was handsome. He didn't present a plan that will help, with the economy or with anything that make the country better. And they were going
Mm,
to elect a president because of looks. Uh,
yeah.
no, it's a problem. That's not the way it is.
Yeah.
And we are here to tell the truth from our perspective. You can
Hmm.
like it, you can dislike it, you can agree with us, you can disagree with us.
Yeah.
I do encourage people to do their own research, be critical thinkers, and prove us wrong if we are wrong. But don't
Right.
necessarily call us, I don't know, whatever, without actually backing up what you're saying with some research.
Exactly. Yeah. And it kills me though how some people, when you do speak on certain issues that exist in DR, it's like, oh, you've been influenced. You're influenced by this group or by that group. I'm like, why does it always have to come back to that? Like, for example, if you speak on colorism, oh, you've been influenced by African Americans, you've been influenced by this group of Black people or that group. It's like, why does everything always have to involve being influenced by other people? Like, why can't we just admit that we have some of these issues too? Like, I don't know, that just really gets to me sometimes. But I mean, I guess that's just part of the initial, I don't know, things that you have to go through when certain issues that have kind of been kept quiet, finally start to be addressed. It's going to be met with, resistance and people that don't like it, but you just have to get through it. That is what it is. But I don't know. We definitely have a lot of things that needs to be worked on. But like you said, we have to say it. Some people are going to like it, some are not. But I don't know. That's the only way we can make progress.
Exactly. We just want progress for our Dominican Republic. We want the best for Dominican Republic, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for watching our content today. Thank you, Viva Bella, for joining me again in this interesting discussion. Please hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, and subscribe to Viva Bella Extina channel. Thank you so much. Have a great, wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thank you.